Hello, everyone, and welcome to this special COVID-19 legal compliance session run by Kaizen Synergy Law Firm. My name is Nihal Samara. I'm the General Counsel and Legal Director here at Kaizen Synergy Law Firm. I'd like to welcome you all to today's session. Today's session will be recorded and all materials will be made available to all attendees, including the resources that we are using in today's session. With this session, it is as interactive as you want it to be as well too. You can ask questions as we move through this webinar this morning. As I mentioned, it will be recorded all the way up to the question and answer part of the session, where we will actually open up the phone lines and stay on the line to answer any questions that people might have. Today's session focuses really on the coronavirus and Australian workplace laws. This is particularly important as we see agencies start to reopen around the country. In Victoria, for example, there are many agencies and companies that their first day of trading is actually today after many, many months of being in lockdown. However, in saying that, to put it into context, what we are seeing is that as agencies across the country look to reopen, and some of which are scheduling to have employees return to the workplace in 2021, we need to consider carefully what the workplace laws require employers to do, how you manage that as well too, and what are the workplace health and safety requirements that your agency also needs to consider. So we will be going through each of these today as an overview around it, and also putting in some context as well too. This session is focused specifically for the not-for-profit and community services sector. So when we refer to personnel here, we're not just talking of paid employees, but also volunteers, members, and board members as well too, as part of that broader group. If you do have any questions, by all means, you can use the question and answer tab on your dashboard, and we will get to those as we go through today's session. So the webinars that we have been running actually since February this year have been incredibly popular. We have agencies even today attending from just about every part of the not-for-profit and community services sector. Everyone from education groups, schools all around the country, religious groups, community legal service agencies as well, Aboriginal agencies, museums, arts cafes, and a number of other agencies as well. So irrespective of where your agency is placed within the not-for-profit sector, where you look to reopen, or whether you're already operating, or whether you're looking to reopen, as I mentioned, in 2021, then you need to start to consider, obviously, what your workplace laws are that affect your agency, and also what are the systems that you have in place. So today's agenda, what we are going to be looking at is the legal compliance framework, as well as the management compliance requirements as well too, things like the HR requirements, what systems have worked for agencies as well too. So we're not just going to provide just the legal theory or background around this, but actually look at, well, what are some of the basic things, fundamental things that other agencies have done that are actually working and have continued to work throughout this pandemic, even going back as far as February this year and looking forwards into 2021. What are the systems that they've got in place to manage some of these legal compliance changes that are occurring? And that's where we'll actually look at even the structured processes. We've got template documents and the likes that your agency can access as part of today's session. As always, we'd like to pay our respects to the elders past and present upon the lands on which we all meet. While this session is being run by webinar and recorded, we do pay our respects to the traditional owners accordingly. So let's look at the laws and case studies. Now, as part of this, to put the law into context is something that I just want to do briefly for you. While COVID-19 in many states and territories is under control, if I could use that word or phrase, it is something that very quickly can change. And we've seen that just in the past few weeks in Victoria, where literally a single case can literally stop or put a halt to an entire suburb or region. And just in a few days, we saw a truck driver travel from a shopping centre some kilometres away and travel into regional Victoria. And without going through all the details around this timeline literally gives you a snapshot of how quickly COVID-19 can actually spread. So while we're looking at the laws and workplace laws, I want to put it into context around, well, what are the backdrops of how quickly things can change and why are we going to make some of the recommendations we are in terms of monitoring staff as almost a daily or weekly process that you'll see that we'll actually recommend. So as part of this workplace laws, one of the areas is to ensure that staff are kept safe. They know what their responsibilities are. Yes, we'll look at the fair work requirements as well too, and directions coming out of that regulatory body. But we need to put into context how quickly COVID-19 can spread. The threat, if you like, is not gone to sleep, so to speak, but it is something that is real and needs to consider. So very quickly, you can see that from this, we can move from 0 cases in your suburb or agency to literally 24 hours later, a state health department arriving in your suburb to literally contact trace a large population group. And how do we actually look at that? So when we're looking at coronavirus and workplace laws, one of the things our law firm does do is not just provide a theoretical background around it, but look at, well, what is the process to actually manage your HR requirements? What is the process to manage and report your risks in order to meet your work health and safety obligations? What is the process for you to monitor staff in a voluntary type of way? And how have agencies actually done this since February? So rather than just provide the theoretical framework, let's actually have a look at some real life case studies of what other agencies have done and done incredibly well over the last few months. And as I've mentioned, we will use a case study coming out of Victoria around this. And this will involve Rumballara Aboriginal Agency, where they have actually monitored and they've had a recent outbreak in their suburb, not in the agency, but in their suburb and catchment area. And looking at what we're going to talk about, the workplace laws in relation to HR registers, risk reporting, pandemic forms, and involving their staff in actually reporting this as well too. So by attending this webinar today, what you should be getting out of it is to look at an understanding that COVID-19 will be with us for some time. So as we return to work and businesses reopen, we need to ensure that we have robust HR systems and WHS policies in place to support this process. And that's why we are running this topical webinar today. By attending this webinar, you should be getting some timely collection of resources, of legal updates that are position you and your agency to start using them even this afternoon, to look at what COVIDSafe systems and other activities other companies are doing in the not-for-profit sector to meet some of these workplace laws and changes as well too, and also see a couple of examples of what has worked to give you some context around this as well. A few housekeeping items that we always cover during our webinars is that this webinar is being recorded all the way up to the question and answer part of the session. You can ask questions in the chat bar as well too on this webinar. That is not made public, and we will actually get to those questions as we move through today's session. If you wanted to go back and have a look at our past webinars, you can do that on our Gemba 360 YouTube channel as well too. and all materials referred to in today's session, including these slides, this webinar, and all other materials will be circulated to all of the attendees today. There is also a knowledge base that is also available as well too. And you can access that by going to our website here of kaizensynergy.com. And you can actually click on the knowledge base item in the top right-hand corner, and that'll bring up all the past information for you to see as well too. If you do have any questions, you can always contact us, either call our direct line. My mobile number is equally made available throughout the past few months as well too. And either or is fine to contact us if you do have any questions after today's session. So just a very brief introduction, and I will move quickly through these slides. We have a large number of agencies joining us again today as part of this open legal compliance webinar that we are running. We have onboarded as a company, Kaizen Synergy Law Firm has onboarded some 2,000 not-for-profit agencies just in the past few weeks alone to support them with their COVIDSafe Plan and dashboard reporting. As part of that, you do have access to your Gemba 360 COVIDSafe dashboard, which has all of the resources available in today's session as well too, and you can start using that today. All the materials we use will also be updated, so you will be ready to go as part of this process. Just a bit of background for those clients of ours that are new and people joining us for the first time as well too. Kaizen Synergy Law Firm is a law firm that I actually set up 10 years ago now. Since then, we've just got awards in pretty much every space that's possible around things. That includes a recognition by Aboriginal and Community Services for their NAIDOC awards for services outstanding beyond and above the call of duty, and was actually awarded a family painting during that time as well too. Our disaster and COVID management systems as well too, that our COVID systems are designed on from our compliance and disaster systems, was actually recognized back in the Dubai International Emergency and Disaster Conference back in 2000. And since then, our systems and legal work has appeared in some of the peer-reviewed journals, including journals of computer and law, and also been awarded public-private partnerships and university awards for some of the compliance systems that have been designed over the years. With it, we will be referring to the Gemba 360 compliance system, which you all have access to. And as I've mentioned, it is a mobile system that literally allows you to access this from any mobile device, and yourselves are up and running as of today. So with it, the COVIDSafe Plan and workplace laws. Essentially, where these come from around the COVIDSafe Plan, just to start with, this was something announced by the Prime Minister that as part of the three-step framework going back a number of months ago, all workplaces need to develop a COVIDSafe Plan. And we have run previous webinars on what these look like. Essentially, as part of the myriad of legal compliance obligations, there is a lot of information that is out there covering from the biosecurity legislation to work health and safety rules, COVID safe apps, health warnings, directions, all this that is provided. Now, quite simply, to put this into context before just looking at the workplace laws, is that the COVIDSafe Plan is really your driving compliance document. Many state premiers and territory premiers have announced that it's really about ensuring your staff are kept safe, ensuring that community and services are supported and continue to be delivered. It should meet your changing access to business services and also allow access to support to continue to deliver services. One of the things that I have extended this to around what your COVIDSafe Plan should be doing for your company is to ensure that it meets its legal compliance obligations. And what I mean by this is that a plan shouldn't just sit there on a shelf. It should be able to be dynamic. So as the law continues to change, it will change to ensure that you meet those requirements. Now, putting that into action is that there are already talks of class actions for agencies that haven't done this well. So when we look at this, we are seeing private aged care services, we're seeing judicial inquiries into the government management of hotel quarantine. So there's a lot of current class actions that are being tabled and talked about and put up in the media. So this is a very real risk for your agency. It is not just a public health response to COVID-19, but also around the management of your company as well too. So COVID-19 will be with us for some time. While restrictions are being eased around the country as well too, it is important that your business has a plan and continues to plan to keep your workplace healthy, safe, and virus-free. And in that context, there is and are duties on directors and officers of the company around this. And this will frame how we look at workplace laws for you. So when we talk of duties of directors and officers, directors, we're obviously talking about committees of management and your boards, but equally in the roles of officers will include people like the CEO and executive officer positions, and also management group as well too, including people like HR officers, compliance officers, and extending to quality officers where they need to actually have a role in the decision making and ensuring the workplaces are kept safe and also virus-free around this. So there is a positive duty on directors and officers to exercise due diligence to ensure that your employees and also personnel around this, so including volunteers and members as well too, comply with their duties and obligations. And this means that you need to ensure that your knowledge of COVID-19 situation is kept up to date. And that includes attending webinars like this. So when we look at workplace laws, we're starting to look at the spectrum of people returning to work, but also the gamut, as I mentioned, of people being stood down as well too, and essentially people also leaving the workplace as well. So let's cover what these workplace laws look like and what are some of the considerations that your agency needs to consider, and what are some of the more recent changes, even going back to September, that you need to consider, or late September, that you need to consider. Now, we have looked at and pulled information from the Commonwealth government, state governments, and also Fair Work around this to ensure that this information is the latest it is and also up to date for today's webinar. I will be talking to these slides as well too as we move through this, and information pulled is, we acknowledge, the work coming out of the Fair Work Regulatory Office as well too, and their directional papers and websites around this. So before your agency and employees return to work, it's important that you have a plan to keep your workplace safe. And this means healthy and free of coronavirus. So we'll have a look at what agencies have done to ensure that those processes are in place. It's also important to review your plan, as Fair Work has mentioned, and regularly so that it stays up to date as restrictions ease or change as well too. When there is a need to resolve an issue when returning to work, what Fair Work is suggesting employers and employees do is to look at a solution that works to benefit both of yourselves around this. And this is something that I will return back to from a legal compliance point of view. It may well be that employees have a fear of returning to work, and what is the process that you need to have to ensure that that happens. There are also changes to pay and leave during the coronavirus period as well too. So there have been changes to some employees' pays and leave entitlements. These include the introduction of the JobKeeper scheme, unpaid pandemic leave and annual leave at half pay in most awards, and award flexibility provisions in some awards as well too. Now, these changes don't affect every workplace, and employers and employees still can access their existing pay and leave entitlements under the National Employment Standards and relevant awards. enterprise agreements, contracts, and workplace policies. Now, for agencies that work across certain border towns as well too, and we do a lot of work across Queensland as well too, and also down in Victoria and New South Wales border, where border closures also have an impact on people's access to the workplace. Now, during the coronavirus outbreak, some Australian states and territory borders may be temporarily closed, and we've already seen that in Victoria. We've seen that in Queensland as examples of that. We're still seeing that in WA as well. Now, importantly, if employees can't attend work because of an enforceable government direction, then this will limit their ability to travel or cross state borders. Now, in doing that, some agencies have provided employees with letters, what we've called letters of comfort. In Victoria, we're calling them work permits as well, where either they have those work permits and they are showing what plans they've got in place to support them traveling. If there is traveling exemptions, then those can apply. Alternatively, if there is already working from home arrangements that are still in place, and that needs to be considered, but also quarantine and self-isolation may also open the door to pay and leave options for you as well too. And it is something that you need to consider as well. Now, agencies have also asked us about stand down during coronavirus and issues that have come up, and we will be covering that in the next few slides. So essentially, on the 1st of September, there was an extension to the JobKeeper scheme, which was passed by Parliament. And this extended the provisions to take effect from the 28th of September all the way through to the 28th of March 2021 next year. And so with it, there will be some areas where the JobKeeper scheme specifically applies to new rules, and I'll cover those in the next few slides on what that and how that actually applies to some agencies that are joining us today. So with the extension of the Fair Work Act and JobKeeper provisions, under the extended provisions, certain employers who are receiving JobKeeper payments for their employees will continue to receive them after the 27th of September. And you can still continue to use the JobKeeper provisions to give your employees enabling stand down directions. For example, a direction to work less or no hours, giving their employees enabling directions, for example, a direction to change duties or work from a location. And we've seen that with some agencies where there is a need to shift the duties of the workforce in order to provide a support service to their existing clients and essentially to keep their business open. You can also make arrangements or agreements with your employees to change their days or different times when they will work on different days as well too. And you can also allow employees who qualify for the JobKeeper scheme who receive JobKeeper payments on behalf of your agency for the first time or on or after 28th of September to also keep these provisions as well too. So you can see there is still that flexibility that does still apply. Now, there is this new term that is being thrown around called legacy employers and information for eligible financial service providers. Now, essentially, legacy employers are employers that where extended provisions allow for some employers, known as legacy, what they're calling legacy employers, to continue using some of the JobKeeper provisions with some changes. So as things continue to relax under changes to lockdown measures, you may be considered to be a legacy employer or agency in this case, if you've been previously participating in the JobKeeper scheme, but no longer participating from the 28th of September. If you can demonstrate a 10% decline in turnover for a relevant quarter by obtaining a certificate from an eligible financial service provider or a statutory declaration for a small business, or if you meet these other two requirements as well too. Now, what this means is when you're looking at the satisfying the 10% decline in turnover test, legacy employers will need to satisfy the 10% decline in turnover test and have a statutory declaration for each relevant quarter moving forwards. This will be for the 28th of October if the above conditions aren't met, and then moving forwards for the 28th of February 2021, again, if the conditions aren't met as well too. So by doing this, essentially what you're able to do is to issue stand down directions if you're a legacy employer still, if you're giving the change of duties to staff as well too, based on their current job description as well too, or position description. And you can also make arrangements or agreements with employees to work on different days. So there is that flexibility if you're classified to be a legacy employer and have JobKeeper directions and agreements as well. And these can continue across these dates as well too. Now, any JobKeeper enabling directions or agreements that legacy employers already have in place will end on the 27th of September 2020. What you will need to do is then reissue and make these new directions and agreements if you haven't done this already. So those ended on the 27th of September, and I know a number of agencies have already done this. So essentially how you're doing this is that essentially after the 27th of September, you can provide direction which result in an employee working less than 2 hours if that's what you require them to do, or there is a reduction in full-time or part-time employee hours of work to less than 60%, ordinary hours as of the 1st of March 2020. There is also other enabling directions or duties that you can also provide eligible employees, and also JobKeeper arrangements to change the work of days or times. So you can actually see there is still flexibility in the workplace for you to be able to do this under the conditions that you meet these previous requirements as well too. And if you are considered to be a legacy employer as well too. There is also agreements to take annual leave. So under the original JobKeeper provisions, qualifying employers could make agreements with eligible employees to take annual leave. This included taking annual leave at half pay as well. And essentially these provisions have been repealed and stopped applying from the 28th of September. So from this date, any agreement that was made under these provisions stop applying. Now, what happens though is that from the 28th of September, agencies and their employees need to follow the usual rules of taking and requesting annual leave, including those set by an agreement or an award. So you can see as part of this, the Fair Work Commission will continue to deal with disputes under JobKeeper provisions, under the extended scheme as well too. But it will, if you do go down this path, then you may see that some investigations by the Commission may ask you for this information as well too. So it's important that you document these down. We have listed the temporary award changes that some of you may that it may apply to as well too, and we will send you and circulate these around in the materials today. And you can essentially look at these as a suite of documents together. In saying that, what you need to also look at as part of this process is the work health and safety requirements. Now, under work health and safety, there is a positive duty on both employers and employees to meet their Department of Health requirements, safe work requirements, smart traveler requirements, communicable disease requirements, and we've summarized these down for you into a COVIDSafe plan, which you all have access to. Now, what's important around the use, and we've been asked around the COVIDSafe plan, and we will go through that shortly. What agencies have also asked is, can we ask employees to download the COVIDSafe app or contractors to ensure that they're compliant with the COVIDSafe app. Now, downloading and using the Commonwealth government COVIDSafe app is completely voluntary, and this is actually put into law and legislation as well. Employers can't make current or future employees download and use the app. You can't make downloading or using the app a condition of employment, or you can't make downloading or using the app a condition of the employee entering your workplace or doing their work. But I will show you what other agencies have done to support their employees around this. Now, equally, employees can't also refuse to provide or receive services or goods from a person because they're also not using the app either. So you can see that this is causing a bit of confusion out there, but agencies have said that currently the law stands that you cannot direct an employee to download and use the app, and that includes contractors as well too. But we will show you what agencies have done to support the monitoring of staff and ensure that their workplace is kept safe as well too. Now, the other part that you need to consider as part of your policy requirements is working arrangements and the JobKeeper scheme. Employers under the JobKeeper scheme can use the Fair Work Act and JobKeeper provisions to reduce an employee's hours or days of work, change their duties, and change an employee's location of work as well too. And under this, we have suggested that you update your policies, and we'll show you some template policies that you can start using today. Equally, stand down provisions still are in place as well too, where agencies may be able to stand your employees down during the coronavirus outbreak for various reasons. And this includes when the business has closed because of an enforceable government direction, which means that the employee can't be usefully employed even from another location. If there is a stoppage of work due to lack of supply for which your agency can't be held responsible, or alternatively, if there's a qualifying employer or legacy employer which uses a JobKeeper enabling stand down direction under the Fair Work Act as well too. So one of the things that agencies have unfortunately had to ask us for legal advice on was, what about ending employment and redundancy during this whole pandemic? Well, quite simply, let me summarize this down into a slide for you. Before ending the employment, there are a number of things employers need to be aware of before ending an employee's employment. Essentially, under the Fair Work Act, as provided by the Fair Work Commission, an employee is protected from being dismissed because of their temporary absence due to injury or illness. Now, the Fair Work Act also includes protection on being dismissed because of discrimination, if it's unjust or unreasonable, or they have another protected right. That said, notice and final pay for an employee can lose their job because of the impacts of coronavirus. Now, their entitlements will depend on how and why their employment ends, and I've covered those in the previous slides. It may be, for example, if the employment ends because your agency closes down permanently, or because the role is no longer required as a result of this whole pandemic as well too. And the employee may be entitled to redundancy pay as part of this. Now, equally, as I've mentioned, their stand down provisions are in place, and you may look to consider this as well too, depending on where things are sitting. So with it, a stand down provision is where there's a direction from the government. So for example, if there is an outbreak in your suburb and there's an immediate lockdown, or there's a screening that needs to happen where a direction is provided, there's a stoppage of work where the employer can't, where your agency can't be held responsible, or you're a qualifying employer or legacy employer as well too. Now, when we look at these rules, and there was a fair bit of rules to look at, what's the process for managing your legal compliance? And it's well and good to say, here is the COVIDSafe framework that the Prime Minister has put up some time ago, and this has been updated. But let's have a look at what agencies have actually been doing around their Gemba 360 COVIDSafe dashboard around this. Essentially, we've put together your plan, which you all have a single seat to jump in and have a look at today. This has been loaded in for your work health and safety obligations as part of this process to view. It'll meet your duties of directors and officers. So it gives you the checklist, essentially going bang, 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 bang. This is what I need to look at. This is when I need to look at it. If the law changes, your agency will get automatic feeds coming directly out of our law firm to support this process as well too. And essentially the underlying principles which we've seen, maintaining social distancing, staying home if unwell, frequently cleaning, and looking at a COVID-safe plan for workplaces still work. Now, with it, there are religious agencies that we work across the country. We've used Rumballara as an example, and I thank Laurie Seville, the Chief Operating Officer, for allowing us to share some of their learnings around this and dashboard splash screens. Equally, there are also religious agencies completely different to Rumballara, which is Aboriginal community-controlled agency. On the other hand, there's religious groups that work all across the country and have footprints and ministries in every state. There's schools that use this plan as well too, that are based either in a single suburb. There are some that are spread across the country as well too. So with this, the underlying principles of these four measures are still valued. Now, with the COVIDSafe plan, essentially what we've done, and I'll start with the plan and then drill down into the workplace requirements. So once the plan is in place, and what we've looked at over the last few webinars is to look at the legal compliance and policy directives, pulling it from the biosecurity legislation. We've looked at the Commonwealth directives, and if you haven't seen our past webinars, a lot of agencies have jumped on to the YouTube channel, and you can watch those there as well too. We've pulled directions from the Commonwealth government, the state government, safe work directions. You can see those here. Loaded those into your self-assessment checklist tool, and this gives you your compliance obligations for your COVIDSafe plan. This was something that was put up back in February or March, and it still continues across all of our slides. It's the minimum Commonwealth directions on what you need to do as part of this process to ensure that your employees and volunteers are kept safe. I won't go through each one of these 14-point items, but essentially the framework is there. Essentially, what we've then got is your safe work guidelines as well. And there are items around isolation, seeking advice, transport that employees equally need to follow. And one of the things I will just mention is that the obligations of the workplace is now not just on your agency, but also on employees to ensure that they don't put other people at risk as well too. And so from managing legal compliance within your agency, one of the things that agencies have done very, very well that have been doing this from February is essentially having their COVIDSafe plan and engaging with their staff and volunteers and contractors to reporting on COVID-19 and individual assessments across their agencies. So essentially, let's have a look at a case study around this, and we'll use Rumballara Aboriginal Cooperative, which is an agency, a community-based, not-for-profit agency based in Shepparton, which is also important because in the last few weeks, they've actually had in their suburb, not agency, in their suburb, a person that traveled from some 60, 70 kilometers away, a truck driver, right at the start I mentioned this, traveled through Kilmore, up the freeway to Shepparton, and infected, and essentially a number of other people in different cafes and other businesses got affected as part of this process. And thousands of people were potentially exposed, and suburbs had to be tested. Essentially, what they've done is this. They've got their plan in the disaster, and you all have access to this as well too from today. So essentially what they've got is their step one was their plan, their COVIDSafe plan in this. They've got their policies, which I'll show you, also located in the documents part. They've got their pandemic forms, they've been made staff as part of their workplace to report their COVID safe reporting each day. They've got, to give you some idea, some 15, as of yesterday, some 15,000 individual reports have been done by staff over the past few months. So they've got some 200 or 300 odd staff, and now some literally 15,000 individual reports by people simply voluntarily doing this each day for the past number of months. And they can actually go back and do, essentially, if they wanted to, their own contact tracing if they needed to as well too. The HR registers within their HR system allows them to view staff profiles and also actively monitor risk incidents as they occur in real time as well too. They've got their suite of policies around their work health and safety policies as well too, and changes to these have occurred over this period of time. So essentially, when you look at running your legal compliance obligations and what these mean for workplace HR systems and work health and safety policies, essentially what you've got is all staff supporting your agency in being able to monitor this process moving forwards. Now, let's actually have a look at what this actually looks like. We'll send you you've got access to your login details to your dashboard, and you can simply go to our site, click on it, it'll come up with a blue button and you can log in. And this is our demo site for you to see. You will have, as part of this, updates already pushed as part of these resources to view this, and you have access to a single seat to view all this information as well too for all of your agencies. Now, first of all, when you log in, you'll see it is very social media looking, and we've done this purposefully as part of our system to support your agency. So you'll have your name and your position here. When a staff member logs in, they can undertake their own COVID test or assessment. They have the most up-to-date COVID assessment based on your state or territory health directions. People can go through and do the self-assessment, and this is exactly what Rumballara staff have done each day, starting back in February. And when they've got it, they've essentially completed it. A manager can view it and see exactly how their staff are traveling at any point in time. And you can go back and view that, and you've essentially screened by doing this each day. Your staff are essentially taking literally 30 seconds out of their day at most to do this self-assessment, and you know that the staff that are showing up are COVID safe. If they tick yes to one of these questions, then they shouldn't be attending the workplace because they essentially have one of the potential epidemiological criteria that the health departments have said, hey, you could be COVID positive. So essentially, this is something that has equally been done. Now, with it, you've also got access to the risk notifications as well. So if there is an incident that comes up, again, people can actually register an incident that comes in. And they've got a series of questions that they can ask as well too. And this is all confidential because essentially you've got access to this, and it's only the administrators in your case that can view it. Now, equally, people can upload their doctor's certificates. They can upload their COVID positive or COVID negative tests if that's what they have as well too. And again, you've got the single source of information that is also available here. Equally, in your Gemba docs as well too, what you have access to is your COVID policies to look at as well. And we've loaded all of the templates in ready for you to use today as part of this process. So some of the ones that I've mentioned from is the work health and safety policy, which is probably one of the more important policies. You've also got the privacy and confidentiality, social gatherings, work health and safety and working from home, and also employment relations policy as well. And you can see this here. I'm just opening this up. And again, you've got the template ready for yourselves to use as part of this process as well. And you can go through and update your policy document to view this as well. And you've got your policy register here. With it, what we've also seen agencies do is also run their HR reporting, which I've mentioned to you. And under the HR button here, what you have is your virtual HR workforce dashboard. You can manage your timesheets and leave forms as well too for staff. Staff, importantly, can also update their own contact and emergency details as well too by simply clicking on the My Info tab as part of this. But what this gives you is your single dashboard from a COVIDSafe register to manage your volunteers, to manage your employees, to verify contact information that you might want to see on this. Also, if they needed to update their mobile phone information, it's all essentially here for you to run. Now, what you are able to do as part of this is then open this up to other agency staff as well. And so from here, they essentially get their own profile that they can essentially run. And here it is here. So if I wanted to update this, I can simply click on my contact details, add a photo in. I can add in my own emergency details. If I wanted to add somebody else, I can do that directly from here. And it is very, very fast for you to do it. Equally, if your employees, whether you're a small cafe, a school, you can have your volunteers, your students in here. You can run also your volunteer programs for your parents groups, etc. But all your staff can also manage all of their information directly from here. Now, equally, what you can see, you've got your members registers, volunteer registers, and also board members, if you like. Again, from here, from a legal point of view, agencies have said to us, look, we need to be able to run very quickly our reports on whether our staff are COVID safe. And let me show you how quickly this can be done. I simply click on run, and here it is here. I've produced my report literally in a blink of an eye. Now, agencies have also said to us, look, we need access to the COVIDSafe reports. And some agencies have also had to supply these as they've opened up. And here is the really important part of this around accessing it from the state or territory health department. Now, I pointed out to you that even Scott Morrison, the Prime Minister, pointed out on this three-step plan that you need to have the COVIDSafe plan in place. But you need to be able to provide that to a government department should they call for it. Now, under the disaster button, which you all have access to, you can simply, to show you, and I've just got a question, could you show me how to get there again? You can simply click on the disaster button. Once you do that, that'll bring you to this screen here. I'm clicking on projects, and this will bring up my three-step plan. I can bring it up, and if I needed to, literally all this Commonwealth directions, territory government directions, safe work directions, CDNA from the CDNA authority as well too, we've brought together and put into a checklist here. So you can literally run through these and go bang, 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 I've met my legal compliance obligations. With it, once you've done that, if a department, state department or health department wanted you to submit your COVIDSafe plan and show what you've done, you can simply click on this button here. And here it is here. I'm producing this in real time for you. And other agencies have done this over the past couple of weeks, especially in Victoria, where different agencies have, health departments have asked for this. It's literally taken them a few minutes to do. And it's up to date. Now, what I mean by up to date around this is that when we said you need to review a policy, as I've said to you around your work health and safety, you can actually go in, you can click on this item, it'll give you the checklist of things to do. You can actually run this in, you can use it as a file note, and you can update your information here. It'll prompt you on what templates to actually use in the dashboard. It'll prompt you to make what changes you need, and it'll prompt you to update what you need to do and when within your space. So from managing your legal compliance obligations under your dashboard and resources, what you'll see is that you've got your COVIDSafe Plan assessment for staff ticked off. Should an incident occur, you've got your risk management space here that people can actually update and lodge incidents for you to see. If you needed to monitor your volunteer registers, staff registers, personnel registers, you've got access that you can load this information here, and you've got access to your template documents. Now, as part of that, one of the last things I will just show you around this is that if you wanted to send out a notification to all of your people and said, hey everyone, there is a new policy, new public health policy that I need people to read. And I've said, here is the policy, please read this today. Now, what will happen is that you can actually basically go in, and let me just show you how this works. I can essentially go in, select a document that I want to have placed on here. I can load in a document, and I'm just going to load one in. I can click on it, it'll pick it up. You can do the same thing from your end. I'm going to post this notice from here, and here it is here. It appears automatically on your notice board for you to use. It'll then send you an email to read as well too. And all the staff, even if you had 200 staff, 300 staff, or even 5 staff, it'll automatically send them an email. And once they've read it, it'll actually mark the date and the time that they've read it. Now, I'm based in Victoria at the moment, and so the time here is just on 11:53 a.m. and it's on the 28th of the 10th. If I was reading this and I was based in WA at this time, it'll be a different time zone, and South Australia, different time zone. So it'll come up with your time zone that you're in fact reading it. It means then, and we've seen this already, that some agencies have been audited and regulators have said, well, show me how your staff have, that staff have read a policy. And so rather than sending it out and saying, oh, from a legal compliance point of view, I've just sent out an email. Well, now I can actually go in and say, right, hang on. I can see that this person has read this on this date and at this time. And I can actually see that they've read it. And I've got an audit trail to show that that's been happening. So these are the techniques that other agencies have used in managing their workplace compliance obligations. As the law changes, and you'll see actually in our COVIDSafe Plan that back in March this year, while the Prime Minister had a 3-step plan, and I will just draw your direction to this, and somebody has just asked a question around this, why has our COVIDSafe Plan got 1, 2, 3, and then 2 steps here? Now, what we have seen is that back a number of months ago, when the Prime Minister announced a 3-step plan, at the same time when the JobKeeper program was being announced, there was the notifications around that there will be changes to JobMaker industrial and HR legislation. And we're starting to see that now. So back in March, we actually set this up when this was done on the 5th, the 19th of May, actually. When we saw this done, we actually set this up and included 2 other steps to include a review of certain laws and compliance obligations. And so that's why you'll find that the COVIDSafe Plan that we've set up actually incorporates these requirements, which your agency will continue to get feeds on once you start using the dashboard itself. So with it, our recommendations coming up today, and we're just approaching an hour now, and I know there's a number of questions that people are asking, which we will get to as well, is that look at managing your legal compliance obligations through your HR systems and your policy and screening forms. We cannot stress this enough. We've shown you how other agencies have managed this process, really even since the start in February and then in March when the pandemic expanded, and looking at updating the relevant policies and guidelines. And we've got templates for yourselves to use. For those agencies that are joining us for the first time today, you do have all of these resources available on your COVIDSafe dashboard, and you can work and you can commence working on this with your single login and license that your agency has around that as well too. We can open this up for all staff, volunteers, clients, and other agencies have started to do this as well too. Agencies that like Rumballara have actually opened it up to some of their 200 or 300 odd staff, and you can see the power that they were put in when an outbreak occurred even a couple of weeks ago. Essentially, they changed the indicators very quickly, and all staff were so used to essentially every day logging in, completing an assessment form, that literally within 24 hours they had screened every single one of their staff within their current work environments, wherever they were. So they didn't even need to come into work. They actually accessed this using the online access and able to screen staff very, very quickly. And no one essentially was missed, which is an incredible achievement from that point as well too, during an outbreak within their suburb. Essentially, your policies should now be updated to include the information contained within these slides, and we've summarized these down for you as well too. We will open the phone lines for any questions that you might have. If you are watching this webinar after today's live session and during the recording, you can contact us on 1300 360 360 or email us at support@gemba360.com. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today.